I would just say do your best. Whatever you do is, you know, if it's, I'm much more comfortable talking about like voting rights law because there's like cases and cases on that. I can mold the cases and come to reasonable answers to hypotheticals, but this hasn't even taken effect yet. So it's hard to be able to predict all these things. I think if you do your best, if you're prudent, the overwhelming likelihood is that you'll be okay. A, because nothing bad will happen, and that B, if something ever happened, you'd be able to defend your conduct.
Questions over here?
So a number of us use teaching assistants that are actually our students. They're basically 8th through 12th grade students that work in the classrooms. At least for mainline Temple, our students are always assigned to a teacher. They're not alone teaching the classes.
And they're not adults.
They're not adults.
So they don't have to be tested.
There's the answer.
Well, except like
Whatever 18 to do, right?
Right, they're 18.
I thought it was 18.
That's what it says.
Yeah, if they're 18.
Okay, so if they're 18, because we do have some who are older, seniors in high school. Again, they're not assigned alone to a classroom. They would be assigned to a teacher. They're not teaching alone.
But the only thing I'd say is I don't think the statute says assign alone, teaching alone. I don't think that those are the delineations. I think it's contact with children is the delineation.
Thank you.
That was basically my same question, but just to clarify, so if they're under 18, where they are essentially defined as children themselves, then they would not be subject to it. But if they're 18,
No, I mean, because the most absurd thing would be, everyone's classmates have to be tested. And, everyone would have to be tested
but these
all the time. And so that, which is why, again, there are bills to modify this law, because even the law we're trying to cover that situation, as drafted, it does create a sort of a logistical nightmare. And when I say it's an overreaction, it's not. Overreactions usually are defined as going beyond what common sense would dictate. A lot of this is, I think, beyond. A lot of these hypotheticals are beyond what common sense would dictate. If you're hiring a complete stranger to lead the overnight canoe trip, maybe check him out. All right, but parents of kids in the school who have contact with other kids seems like that's a bridge too far to me, but that's, I'm not the judge.
Okay, question. We have long distance learning programs, Skype or FaceTime, and in particular, those teachers, 2 of those teachers live in New Jersey and Delaware. Do they need clearances through PA?
They need clearances from their own home
State.
state, and there's a 30-day provisional time period. So long as they are covered under the laws of their own state, they have a 30-day provisional time period that they could operate in Pennsylvania. After that, they would need to get Pennsylvania.
But suppose our home state, and I'm not sure if there is such a state, but suppose our home state does not require any clearance.
That didn't come up. It basically said if you're good with your state, you're good with us.
Well, if you're good
What
with
did you
your,
say about the 30 days? No, I didn't understand.
if you hire a guy named Frank, Frank lives in New Jersey, Frank's been cleared in New Jersey, he has a valid clearance from New Jersey, he can work here for 30 days without getting a clearance here.
So he doesn't need to get clearance
After
30 days.
So,
Didn't you say this is education though?
so not directly.
No, but they could be Skyping in and they could be doing something inappropriate on the internet, correct? Would that be the same thing?
Yeah.
Forget whether it's out of state or in state.
yeah, I mean, that could be, that's certainly a possibility.
So you see how frustrated we are because we all have all of these different kinds of situations. And that's why, Senator, you've been invited here. And my question is, particularly something that you said that resonated with me, is the required disclosure statement that we have to fill out if you live in Pennsylvania for 10 years or more. Is that specific disclosure statement live on someplace that we could find so we have the appropriate disclosure?
Yeah, I think it would be, John, the website, the disclosure statement that they have to fill out.
Is there a
For the 10-year
specific?
thing?
disclosure statement that already exists, so we don't have to.
Yes, there's a
restate it?
suggested one on the website. I think that's what I can email a copy out.
No, there's one, I just looked at. There's one that actually was
Is that-
Department of Health Services. If not, we'll get.
I can send it to you.
And you can
Well, I
discuss
have
it.
it, but if not,
So Jonathan will
It's on the
send it.
Department of Health Services website.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have I guess, a jurisdictional question. Clearly, if we are sponsoring a program, it's our program, then we need to make sure that any adult, we need to make sure adults have the appropriate clearances. But what if we rent space to a local Boy Scout group that has meetings in our building? Do we have any responsibility for what happens at that meeting and what interactions go on?
Well, first of all, I assume would the intent be that the Boy Scout leaders, not the scouts themselves because they're under 18, but the Boy Scout leaders, would they have contact with your children?
No, they have.
They don't have only contact
Well, they
with...
could theoretically be members of our congregation, but that's not the relationship. The relationship, we rent the space to this outside organization.
That have nothing
They have
to do-
children that come in.
No, I wouldn't think so. But you've heard the adage, you know, if someone's going to sue someone, they're going to sue everybody. They'll sue not only, you know, the shul, they'll sue the architect who designed the shul. They'll sue, you know. So you know, that could happen. But again, they have to prove that there was some sort of either negligence or violation of the statute. And these are not employees of yours, they're not volunteers of yours, they're outside contractors. And that's how I would interpret it. I'm not saying, you know, please understand that, you know, I like to think that my logic is infallible, even though our religion usually doesn't deal with infallibility. But you know, not everyone always agrees. But it seems to me that that would not be a problem.
I have a couple of questions. One is about mandated reporter training. Does that include volunteers?
No.
No? And it appears to me, it says in one of these pages that 14 years of age or older, they're paid employees. So someone like a CIT at camp, if they're paid, would have to be screened.
The 18-year-old applies to the volunteers.
Okay.
Once you're paid, you become an employee and fall under a different section.
Regardless of age.
Right.
And is there any, this may not related to the bill, parental approval requirements to do background checks on a minor?
Well, I think a parent would have to participate in that. Unless the minor reason have access to the information. So, yeah, I think a parent could say, we're not going to do that. I think, you know, the synagogue would have the opportunity to say, well, we're not going to hire your CIT.
Completely unrelated, but it seems as though there's a missing piece, and I don't know whether my colleagues deal with this at all. Doing background checks or knowing background issues in your congregation. I mean, there may not be volunteers, but we all have, I assume, congregants who have records. And what responsibility do we have to know who's in the building?
I mean, I don't think you have to check everybody who has ever like, you don't have, like, when you go to the mall, you don't have to have the other customers checked because you walk down the mall. I don't think it's anyone who has, like, access to it. I think it's, the statute seems to me to be people that you sort of bring into the orbit to put in front of kids. Employees that you're going to put in front of kids, volunteers that you're going to put in front of kids. I don't think it extends beyond that. And at least that's not how I read it. And again, any other lawyer is welcome to jump in and see if they disagree.
Well, just thinking about what what popped into my head was, what if you have a known, if you're aware you have a congregant who's a known sex offender, nobody really knows, but that congregant volunteers to usher one there, wants to volunteer in the preschool, sorry, and no one else knows, or very few people know, what kind of duty do we have? And both to the congregant, you know, because of her privacy, and to the organization, to the synagogue.
Well, I think there's two different questions. I think, first of all, if you have a known offender in your synagogue, and you don't make affirmative steps to put them in contact with children as a volunteer or as an employee, you would not be liable under the statute. Now, you still could be liable under just common law, if you do something negligent, like, okay, you know, can you, mow, call him mow, molest. Just keep it easy. But, you know, say, Mo, can you watch the kids for a couple hours, you know? Sure. You know, I mean, something like that. Then, that would be negligence outside of the statute, you know? But, you know, in order to be in violation of the statute, I think you have to have more than incidental contact. You have to be deliberate contact in the context of a volunteer or an employee who has contact with kids.
So you don't see any duty to prevent that person from volunteering?
Well, when you say volunteer, then it does come under the statute.
So I have a question along the same lines, not a volunteer though. So I had a congregant call, or potential congregant call, say, I am, and they say sex offender, but they're all involved, you know, so. In any event, thank you. So we're talking about how you come to services. My main concern was you come to services, you go to the bathroom, and there could be a kid in there.
That's not under the statute.
I know that has nothing to do with this really, but where are we with that?
Well, then, you know, there might be, you know, just having him go to the bathroom under no one else's volition or instruction, I'm not sure that now we're just in the strict negligence law. I'm not sure that that's enough. Although maybe, I mean, you might have a jury that says, well, you shouldn't, if you have someone who's a known, you shouldn't have an opportunity for them. I mean, that jury could say that. It wouldn't be under the statute, but that would be a fact question for a jury to resolve.
I just wanted to
Those are tough questions.
follow up on Brian's question earlier about the scourge of bar mitzvah, bar kids that they were guests, you know, they celebrate for that Shabbat. And we're in the sanctuary, so I didn't see anything, or I didn't hear you say anything, but are there any exceptions for, you know, religious services that are going on in the sanctuary? He was talking about the usher who's trying to shush these kids up. Is that person covered? He's a volunteer, but it's in the context of the religious services. Is that?
Well, there's no specific exemption for religious services. What there is it says that the contact is regular, ongoing contact. Now, suppose they're a volunteer every weekend, every Shabbat, he's there. Now, you could argue that's regular, ongoing contact. So if you have someone who's if someone's in a position of being with children regularly under your auspices, it's probably wise to get them checked.
But you're saying with children, what if, I mean, their responsibility is just, you know, someone who's wandering in the sanctuary is to keep order. Could be kids, could be adults. Could be anyone.
Adults don't matter.
Right. But I mean, they're not there usually charged specifically with riding herd on the kids.
Well, then you're talking about, you know, they're not charged with riding herd, but they are charged with, I guess, seating them. I mean, you're getting into fact questions about there's a line at some point. Everyone's going to have a line. Every judge, every jury's going to have a line. And which side of the line are you on? That's a fact. I can't predict how those will go.
So it looks like, I'm sorry, Karen will get the last word, but the question that I have for you, Senator, is you made mention that there may be a bill passed that says volunteers won't have to pay for background checks. Is that a 10-year thing, 10-month thing?
Oh.
Do we have any idea?
Well, in the Pennsylvania legislature, no, you have no idea.
That's why I started out with 10 years.
It could be a June thing, or it could be a never thing. I wish I hope that helps.
Thank you. I want to thank you for being here. I heard you at the Federation program a couple weeks ago about human trafficking, so I'm very impressed with you then, and I knew that you'd be great today.
Oh, thank you.
Disappointed. Even though it doesn't apply to this specific topic, I want to go back, if you could, since you said you entertain questions about
Sure.
to this issue about members of our congregation who would be on the list. So I've dealt with that, or my lay people, people.
You mean like Megan's list? Or?
Yeah, and this is just, we've had this discussion at this table recently with just a few people to be in necessary attendance. But I think that, you know, the logic part, we all try to do the logical thing all the time, but then when you got to get into court, logic doesn't seem to really apply. And so there isn't really a law that covers everything. And you know, in my heart, if you do the logical thing, I'm thinking it's good enough. But the bathroom issue is a big issue. If we talk, Amy and I were talking about the usher situation. So in our synagogue, the ushers are rotating. If you're going to have a kid who's going to be bar mitzvah, you have an obligation to usher 1 or 2 services prior to your bar mitzvah. That doesn't seem to fit the regular, routine, volunteer role that you're talking about. But in the logical way that I would think, we give written instructions to our ushers, and it would say, do not accompany any child to the restroom, or be alone with any child. Your role is to be in the entrance of the sanctuary to let people in and out so they don't show up to service. Might be too logical for.
That would help. One question I would have is, suppose they have to go to the bathroom themselves.
But then you're not acting in a volunteer role, you're acting in a human role.
Well, again, a lawyer could say, well, yeah, I mean, he didn't volunteer, you didn't bring him on as a volunteer so he could go to the bathroom. You brought him on to watch the kids, but he had to go to the bathroom at a time when you told, you know, I mean, that's, you put him in a place where the only bathroom he had was the same bathroom as the kids go.
Okay, so now rolling into the bigger.
Just playing devil's advocate.
Well, that's what we do. So, in the bigger picture that we're talking about with the Megan's Law issue, we have handicapped bathrooms as a one-person stall. So the way we dealt with this, at least the one person that we know was on the list, is we said, when you come to the synagogue, that's the only place you're allowed to go. Period, done. Unfortunately, there's only one in the building, and it's, I wouldn't say it's huge, but it could be a long schlep from one end to get there if he's in a big hurry. And I don't know if that's really good enough.
I don't either. I will tell you, it's certainly bad. You know, all these things help. All these things make things a problem less likely. If the guy is like, you know what, I just saw a kid go in the bathroom and I'm going to do something, you know, I don't know how compelling that.
I mean, we don't brand people in this country with a, you know, after they've been offended. We put them on a list that anybody can see, but we don't tattoo on the forehead, you know, look out for me, I'm a bad person.
You're right.
And so it's a really difficult place. And baddies were around in the 60s. We didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's really, I feel great about this, but I still feel that there's so much gray.
There is a lot of gray. There is, and it'll be, you know, 10 years from now, we come back, there'll be a lot of cases that will have been decided on just the very questions everyone is asking today.
Well,
And we can talk about, you know, the Jones case said this, and the Smith case said that, and therefore, we have a sense that you can do this and you can't do that. We'll have much more of a sense of that.
We have the same situation. We require the person to call before they come to the building, and I have a guard that I add who shadows them anytime they leave the sanctuary during services, just what we felt comfortable with. And it's
How does
expensive.
it become aware of the person now?
You know, it was
They
before
sell
my
it.
time, so I don't know, but
Well,
someone
Megan's
became
list is, you
aware.
know, if they're on Megan's list, they're on the website, and they're supposed to report where they live, so, which creates other problems. But, so if someone checks once every 6 months, you know, that's.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge we all have is Friday night, the building's open to anyone who wants to attend services, so you could have someone unbeknownst to you come.
It's easier. That's easier. When you don't know, it's easier. It's when you do know.
But should we know? I mean,
You
so
can't
we-
tell
why do
anybody
our
who walks in on a Friday
No, I'm
night.
talking about our congregants. I mean, should we be doing checks on all our congregants? Should we know that they're?
I don't think, the law does not require that, and I think you would have fewer congregants.
Especially if they had to pay for their own check.
Yeah. Before you can join, you have to submit to a background child molestation check. It's not really warm and fuzzy.
What about welcoming?
Yeah. But, you know. Anyway, look, I thank you all for listening, and again, what I will do is, as sure we email at least somebody here, Jillian. And, if there's any legislative changes, if there's any cases that come down, even if we don't have decisions, if I read in the paper that someone sued because of X fact pattern, at least you know that's a fact pattern that results in someone getting sued. So maybe not successfully, but we'll try to keep you posted of that as we go forward.
Do you have one more question?
Yeah. I'm at your disposal.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
That's why she's going to hand it on to me. So, one of the questions that I have that hasn't really been discussed is, it sounds like everyone in the room is, there are volunteers that are going to have to go and get this form filled in. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's so difficult when one person, tracking one person and saying this person has to do it, as opposed to figuring out ways to gather the troops, maybe some other reasons for getting them together. Has there been any discussion about how, best practices of getting everyone to fill these forms in? A mass, an organization, mass event, someone taking the lead and saying, hey, because it's good publicity, certainly, right? But
there hasn't been as much discussion about it as there will be and should be, because again, it hasn't taken effect yet. No one's had to do it yet. And so we haven't sort of seen the evolution of best practices. My best advice on that is when you have volunteers and you have employees, you have the more it can be done in a way that doesn't make people feel stigmatized, the better. And so it could be pizza and fill out your child abuse form. Party. Make it sort of a joke, and then the one who calls the party, let's say Jill, you call bring everyone together. I'm gonna be the first one filling it out right now.
That's right.
All right, so make people feel, because when you're doing the thing, we want to do a background check on you. That can make people a little paranoid and a little So if, to the extent that it could be look, this is something we all have to do, we're all doing it together. It's like when you go through the airport. Everyone's going through the airport security. So it's not just like we're singling you out. And so if you can make it unstigmatizing, that would probably be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah?
I just have a question as I'm looking through this again. I understand for prospective employees, prospective volunteers, what requirements are there for current employees?
I think as of July 1st, you should get every employee.
That's what I'm sorry.
As of July 1st, you should
As
get
of
every
July
employee.
1st.
Everyone's working for you on July 1st, you get checked. And everybody you hire after should
Including the rabbis, candidates?
Sure.
Yeah, rabbis, candidates go to church a lot. Oh my God, my candidate used to pick me up by my sideburns. You ever have that happen? It's really painful. He caught me listening to the Rolling Stones in October, and oh my God, he got really upset about that.
Question.
I'm so glad to see that. So if I currently have clearances, the Pennsylvania State Police want the criminal history and the child abuse on my current employees, I still have to get new ones after July 1st?
No, they're for 3 years.
Oh,
They're for 3 years from when they were last got.
Okay, and then the only people that need to be fingerprinted are people that have not been living in Pennsylvania for the last 10 years.
Continuous.
That's
volunteers.
That's just volunteers, it's not employees?
Employees have to be,
Wait, so,
The employees have to be fingerprinted. The only exception is volunteers who will sign an affidavit, they've been within the state and they're clean for 10 years, they can sign and not get the fingerprint check. Everybody else, which means all your employees, have to be fingerprinted.
If they haven't,
is that also good for 3 years?
Every 3 years.
So the state clearances and the federal clearances
every 3
are
years.
good for 3 years?
For employees.
For employees.
Well, your fingers don't change.
No, but you gotta check it.
You gotta check.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
My wrinkly.
What business are you in? I had these for 16 years.
So what about the employees who do not have direct contact or ongoing contact? So for instance, our religious school comes in, they come in through a particular door, I wave hello to everybody, I don't have any direct contact or responsibility. Same thing with the secretary, same thing with some other people.
Again, as we discussed earlier, I think it's, these are fact-based questions, and there's a continuum. And if they have absolutely no contact ever, and it can't even happen incidentally, or, then they don't need to get checked.
But my question wasn't for volunteers, it's for employees. So it's the same standard for employees as volunteers?
It's the same standard, I believe so, right? It's a little unclear. It's a little stricter, but I think if, let's say you have an employee as a consultant who's in Denmark, you probably don't have to get them checked.
If you have a specific.
Yeah, so for instance,
Check with the Department of Human Services.
say the secretary, the kids come in for their bar and bat mitzvah lessons, and the secretary checks with the cantor to see if she's available, and the kids sitting there with their parents, waiting in the waiting room.
I'm happy to run any specific scenario by DHS, but except to tell you that it's more stringent on employees.
It says employees having contact with children. That's what the law says. So what does contact mean?
Yes.
There are cases where employees will literally have no contact with children. They're not here. Your accountant, maybe you have an accountant who just doesn't come to the synagogue, or you have an office on the third floor where the kids don't go. And except maybe, I guess, in a parking lot or something, they're not going to run into kids. Those don't have to get checked. Then there's the next step is people who don't really have contact with kids regularly, but like a caterer who's like setting up food, and then kids come in and they're walking around the table, and these are fact questions that will be resolved again through, sadly, unless you're a trial lawyer, through litigation, and then we'll figure that out. But the more contact, the more I urge you to, the more possibility of contact, the more I urge you to have a check. The checks aren't really that bad. They cost money and they're pain, but And the other thing is you have to do it every 3 years. It may be wise in a closed case to do it the first time, and 3 years from now, we'll have more clarity.